And I tell you, forget your full Irish breakfast. That is a full Irish breakfast right there. You got your egg, you got your buttermilk. Quite an acidic hit right there. I don't know why I did that. I've always looked at it and thought, that could make a really nice drink. I don't know what just happened, but it happened. Hi, I'm Donal, and welcome to the channel.
I've been creating easy meals that make your life a little bit easier in the kitchen for over 10 years now. But this channel is all about a little slice of our family life and home cooking. I'll be showing you how to get the most out of your kitchen to next level your dishes for maximum flavor. So stick around, hit that subscribe button, and let's get cooking.
Now, with Paddy's Day just around the corner, I think it's high time we cooked up something delicious and Irish inspired. And if you're watching from America, I think I should correct you right now and tell you that it is not Patty's Day, it is Paddy's Day. Every day in my house is Paddy's Day because I have this Irish accent that I deal with on a daily basis. So we're gonna make up a delicious Irish onion soup. It is a cross between a French onion soup with a bit of Irish mixed in. And to complete the complete Irish stereotype, to add a bit of Irish, we're adding Guinness. For this, we have a heck load of onions. If you're making French onion soup or you've made it before, you'll know that you need a lot of onions. I've even brought out an extra bag just in case I need it. So we're gonna do a lot of chopping on our onions. You don't need much other ingredients. I've got my onions, I've got my stout, I've got a little bit of garlic. I'm gonna add some thyme in here as well. We've got some thyme leaves. The base flavor is gorgeous, but adding that little bit of aromatics, those beautiful thyme leaves, is gonna go a long way to making this soup something really special and memorable. So thyme leaves, and of course, it being Irish, I feel like you absolutely need some Irish butter. So I have a little bit of leftover butter going in here as well. And that's the core basis of this onion soup. So all that's left to do now is chop up these onions. Now, you just want a fine slice on these. I don't want to chop them into pieces. I just want like a nice fine slice like this. And we're gonna crack through probably about 6 onions here. So, over to the pan. Let's get the heat on. And it would be criminal not to fry these off in anything but a little bit of Irish butter. And by a little bit, I mean a fairly generous whack of Irish butter. Straight into the pan, and we're gonna let that melt down. So again, with any time you're kind of using sort of herbs, I always think, like I always see recipes for like 2 teaspoons of thyme. You want to go hefty. So if I have loads of thyme, I'm gonna use loads of thyme, and I really wanna get that flavor to come through when I'm cooking the onions out. So it's left me with a nice generous amount of thyme that's gonna go straight into that butter, which should be beautiful, frothy, and melting. So let's pop them in, listen to the sizzle, and we're gonna get our onions straight in here as well. They'll reduce the heat in there and they'll stop that thyme from burning. My butter was starting to go a little bit brown there, but that is really not the worst thing in the world. So mix this through, and as soon as those onions have kind of softened down, we're just gonna reduce this down to like a medium to low heat. And I'm just gonna come back and look after this every now and then until we have a really gorgeous reduced onion mixture in the pan. Now, while that is cooking off, oh, hang on, we need the garlic. I nearly forgot the garlic. Don't forget the garlic. Take off the tops of these and then just give them a smash with a knife. And I'm gonna pop these straight in, very finely sliced. And remember, you know, when people talk about adding garlic, they always talk about putting it in kind of like towards the end of the cooking on the onions, but basically this is gonna cook low and slow, so I don't have to worry too much about the garlic browning or kind of burning here. So a little seasoning of some salt. The salt will actually help to dry out the moisture of the onions, and it will really help you to reduce down the onions. So a generous, good pinch of salt. A little bit of black pepper. And then we're just gonna get in there and get mixing. And you can see, even just after a minute or so, they're already starting to kind of soften down, and you can see that that big pile of nearly 6 or 7 onions has kind of started to reduce in half. So this is why you do need quite a lot of onions happening. Otherwise, you won't just get enough to serve a big portion of this beautiful Irish onion soup. So this is gonna cook away, and while it's cooking away, let's make some soda bread. Now, this Irish soda bread is certainly not my grandmother's Irish soda bread. It has been tweaked and tested and tweaked again, and this is kind of the version I make regularly. You don't have to knead it for ages, you don't have to rise it. It literally comes together in a bowl, you literally plonk it on a tray and stick it in the oven. It could not be simpler. Speaking of which, we need our tray. We need a few ingredients. We haven't even got to use the Irish stout yet. So I'm gonna just clear the decks here a little bit to give myself some space. I have to say, like, one thing that I miss the most in Ireland is having the proper flour. And then recently, only very recently, I discovered there's an Irish shop that sells good Irish flour, because I think you can't make this unless you have really good Irish. Or is it Irish soda bread if you don't have Irish flour? So a bit of Odlum's flour is what we are pulling out of the press for this one. There's an Irish supply shop that just so happens to be in our neighborhood in Eagle Rock. And there's a little old lady who, maybe she's not that old, but she's a lovely lady who sits behind the counter, and it's like walking back in time. Like, they used to have these little village news agents that you could get everything from the newspapers to the tea bags to a sliced pan and all sorts of things. But it just so happens that there's one down here in our local neighborhood in Eagle Rock in Los Angeles. So that's where I got my Irish flour. And the beautiful thing about this is now that I can make proper Irish soda bread. So grab up a bowl. We need some wholemeal flour. I also need some plain flour as well. I always like to kind of vary it with some plain flour. This is not Irish flour, but you know, what can you do? We need some buttermilk, and my controversial ingredient here is an egg. So I add an egg specifically because over the years I find you get a better texture if you add the egg in. So those are the core ingredients. We need a bit of salt. Oh, and because I've kind of adapted this over the years, this is normally my kind of dinner time recipe. So I do add a little bit of cheddar. So some good Irish cheddar is going in here as well, and we have our thyme leaves. So now it's just a case of weighing it out. I would say do this with weighing scales. I know it's a bit of a pain in the arse to pull out the weighing scales, but if you have a simple little one like this, they are so handy. So we're just gonna pop it on the scales, stick the bowl on top, and then we're gonna weigh out our ingredients. So it's about 100 grams of wholemeal flour, and then it's 375 grams of normal plain flour. To this now, to our flour mixture, number one, I want to add a bit of salt, but I'm also going to add in our cheddar. A little pinch of salt goes a long way. And you know, when I'm doing a sort of savory soda bread like this, because you can do it sweet if you wanted to, you could add some sugar in here, and you could add some maybe raisins or sultanas, go really nicely. But if you're going to go the savory route, thyme and cheddar, you need a bit of salt. And even if you're doing the sweet route, a bit of salt will balance the sweetness. So always good to add the pinch of salt in there. Now, let's grab up our cheese. We're going to take some of this cheese and we're just going to grate this finely. So by doing this, you get a really rich resulting soda bread. So I would highly recommend that you add a little bit of cheddar in here if you have it. So it's about 200 grams of cheddar going in here. Now, even if you can't get your hands on an Irish cheddar, any cheddar will do. You just want that sort of mature, sort of aged, tangy bite. Right, thyme sprigs. So we have our little collection of thyme. I'm just gonna take them off the sprigs. I want a really fine chop on this thyme because you want the flavor of it, but you don't want the texture of it. Okay, this is looking good. Pop it straight in there. And don't forget, the key ingredient to making Irish soda bread is, of course, baking soda, which I do have here. A little bit of baking soda, it's gonna react with the buttermilk. The acid in the buttermilk is going to activate the baking soda and is gonna give you a lovely rise to this. So it's about a teaspoon of baking soda going in here. And then I just get in there with a spatula and give it all a good mix. The wet ingredients we need to talk about are the buttermilk and the egg. So I'm just gonna weigh out our buttermilk. And with your buttermilk, sometimes it kind of sits a little bit, so it's worth giving a good shake before you start. And we've got 350 milliliters of buttermilk going in here. Right, we're at 350. I think I've just enough room for my egg. And now the reason I'm popping it into a separate little container or a glass like this is I'm actually going to use the residual of what gets left over in this glass to brush over the top. So it's a nice little tip, and it's the thing I do every time I make my Irish soda bread. So that's why I do it. The egg, controversial ingredient. For me, it just binds it beautifully, so that's why I add it. It also adds a little bit of richness. The egg yolk in there is going to give you sort of like a buttery feel in the middle of it. Does that happen? I don't know. In my head, that's why I add the egg. I don't want any more questions about it, okay? And I tell you, forget your full Irish breakfast. That is a full Irish breakfast right there. You got your egg, you got your buttermilk. And every time I mix this up, I have always wondered what it actually tastes like. I mean, quite an acidic hit right there. I don't know why I did that. I've always looked at it and thought, that could make a really nice drink. I don't know what just happened, but it happened. Egg, buttermilk, straight into the middle. Make a little well. We're now going to incorporate the wet into the dry, and then we're going to get a rough dough. Okay, so it's kind of a wet dough, but you do want it to be at a stage where you can handle it. So just a last little sprinkle of flour. If you do find it's too wet, just add a touch more flour. And once you have done that, you can kind of turn it out and get it into shape. So pop it straight out onto the board. A last little sprinkle on top, just to kind of make sure that you have clean and dry hands. And now you're just going to shape it into a nice kind of round. This is where you just need to have a bit of confidence in the kitchen. If it is a wet dough you're dealing with, sometimes like buttermilks and flours vary, so don't be put off, just keep working with it. And pretty much what you should be left with is a nice smooth dough, which this is pretty much exactly where we need it to be. So this goes straight onto our baking tray. I'm literally only just gonna add a little bit of flour on the bottom, and we're gonna transfer this over and then just give it a last little shape to make sure it's in business. Give the hands a quick wash. And now, the exact essential part of any Irish soda bread recipe is to let the fairies out. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you didn't grow up in Ireland. You have to slice across your Irish soda bread to let the fairies out and give them a nice little cross. So I don't know what folklore is involved in this, but the cross is absolutely essential. If you don't do this, you ain't got soda bread, my friends. Now, to finish this off, we have that little bit of residual milky, eggy mixture. So I'm just gonna brush that on top. It's gonna give you a lovely rich color. You could do this with just egg if you wanted to, but rather than cracking out another egg, I like to just use up what we have. So this is looking good. Little bit of cheese and oat action on top. This isn't what I always do, but I feel like an oaty situation on top. I like the little cragginess you get from it. So sprinkling of oats. They'll toast up beautifully. And then last little touch is some Irish cheddar cheese. So just pop that grated over the top. You just want a few sprinkles of cheese. This is now gonna cook off for about 35 or 40 minutes, but the way to know that it's done is that it basically puffs up. You should get a nice golden brown onto the top. And the real trick of an Irish soda bread is that when you turn it over and you tap it, it should sound hollow. If it doesn't sound hollow, you haven't got it cooked through. So let's get in the oven and let's get cooked. Now, as you started watching this video, I bet you didn't think that whole big pile of onions would ever reduce down to this, but have a look, because this is where you want to be at. It takes some time. So to this, we are going to add a tiny little bit of light brown sugar. The onions are naturally sweet, but adding like about a teaspoon to a tablespoon of brown sugar here is going to go a long way. We also want to add a little bit of flour in here as well. The reason you add the flour here is because you want to make sure that your soup has some element of thickness to it. So adding a little bit of flour and kind of cooking out, it's like if you were making sort of like a roux, I guess, you know, where you add that little bit of flour and butter just to kind of thicken the soup or the liquid that you're going to use. So about a heaped tablespoon is going to go straight in here. Give that flour a good mix through, and you want it to kind of just cook out so you don't see any lumps or bumps, and it kind of takes that bitter flour taste off it. In the meantime, we have some beef stock. I have a little bit of Guinness, which we're going to crack open and give it a taste. Malty, chocolatey, gorgeous. So straight into the pot. And the beauty of adding this in is not only that, you know, obviously it tastes really great and there's good flavor to it, but you're gonna allow yourself to kind of scrape off any of those brown bits at the bottom so that you get a really rich flavor. We're now at a place where we can add in our beef stock. So straight in, and we're gonna add about half of this. You want to use a good quality organic beef stock here for the best flavor. And by doing this now, you have loosened out that onion mixture and you've got this really rich and luscious dark onion soup. And now that it's at this point, we're going to take out the spoon, we're going to bring it up to temperature and leave it to kind of come to a sort of rolling boil for about 10 minutes for all those flavors to infuse and for it to reduce down ever so slightly. In the meantime, we have a bread which is cooked and ready to rock. Have a look at this beauty. Hello. Now, the beautiful thing about this great bread recipe is the fact that it only takes about 35-40 minutes in the oven, and when it comes out, we need to do the hollow bread check, which is hot, hot, hot. The noise of a freshly beaten pillow is what you're looking for. That is what you're after, and that's how you know that your bread is cooked and ready to rock. So stick it on the board, and the best tip I can give you is that as soon as your bread comes out of the oven, one thing I always do is wrap it in a tea towel, a nice clean tea towel. Now the reason you wrap it up like a little baby, just like this, is that you kind of trap steam in there, and it means that you won't get a really kind of too tough a crust. So we're gonna leave this to cool. Our onion soup is ready to rock, and then it's time to serve up and taste. Okay, we are in business. It's had 10 minutes of cooking time, and right now, it's looking pretty beautiful. Come in and have a look at these bubbles. They're luscious and viscous and all the things you want from an onion soup. So we're gonna turn that off and I'm gonna grab up a ladle. And this is pretty much good to serve at this point. As always with your soups, it is important you test and try before you serve it up. I have hardly any. Oh, this is what I'm dealing with now. There's no other spoons, so I'm using one of Noah's spoons. Needs must. Wow. I know it feels weird to add the sugar in there, but it really is important, especially if you're adding the Guinness, because it has that sort of balance between the sort of bitter, malty, chocolatey flavor you get from the Guinness with the sweetness of the sugar and the onions. It just wraps it together quite nicely. So I have, oh yeah, here's some of me parsley. So grab some of that up. We're gonna serve that alongside as we need it. But this is pretty much good to go. So it reheats beautifully if you wanted to make it and serve it up later. But when it looks this good, it would be criminal not to get in here and try it. We're gonna garnish it with a little parsley on top. I like the fact that you get a bit of green in there. And this is pretty much good to serve up. So I wanna get my soda bread and show you just how beautiful it comes out. So unwrap it. And look at that gorgeous golden color. It's still warm, and to be honest, this is like my favorite way of enjoying it while it's still looking good. So we're gonna slice it in half and have a look at this, because this is the magic of the beautiful soda bread. Hello. Beautiful, cheesy, smelly gorgeousness. The real treat of this soup is dunking the soda bread that is heavily buttered, Irish style, into that beautiful onion soup. So a nice chunk of butter. Magic. It's two very, very simple recipes that come together as a really spectacular Paddy's Day dish. Irish onion soup and a beautiful cheddar and thyme soda bread. I hope you will try it this Paddy's Day if you're celebrating. We'll leave the recipe in the box below if you want to check it out. Of course, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell to know when these videos land here first. Until then, I'm gonna devour this soup and eat this bread laden down with butter. Goodbye.